Hi, Manning here. Happy Friday. As promised, it's Anthony F. Irwin joining us from Silver Screen and Roll, Celtics Lakers tonight. We got a good overlapping ton of storylines between these teams. It's always a fun matchup. It's always a national event. And this year, even though the teams are down, I saw Gary Washburn in the Globes this morning saying that just two mediocre teams going at it this year. I'm still interested in a lot of stuff going on here. Welcome in, Anthony, Silver Screen and Roll writer. I'm doing a pressure cooker thing this year, too, that I want to hit on with him real quick here before we get going. But always fun talking to you on the Twitter line, Anthony. Great to finally have you here on Dome Theory. You are like the perfect person to toss back Lakers Celtics trash talk with. So how's it going?
Thank you for saying all those nice things. I think the niceties end just about there, though.
Yep.
For Lakers Celtics. No, I appreciate you having me on. I'm glad we finally meet in this way, and yeah, it should be a really fun game. They're both mediocre teams, but they are both teams with a lot more expected of them than mediocrity, right? Like that's what makes this game interesting. Is yeah, they both teams are kind of underperforming right now, but both teams are expected to do a lot more than what they're doing right now.
So tell the people, you got this pressure cooker thing on Silver Screen and Roll. Last 5 minutes you said a game. You're going live with everybody and chatting away.
Yeah, so I moved out here to Texas the last couple of years or so, and one thing that I seriously missed was watching games with friends and with family, and tuning in and being able to talk crap with people who root for other teams and whatever the situation might be. So we started streaming, me and then the occasional guest watching the games for the last 5 minutes, giving immediate feedback to how things are going, riding the Russell Westbrook roller coaster live, which is always a terrifying endeavor in and of itself. So, yeah, that's what we've been doing lately.
I can't wait to get to that. But I'm going to start here. Crypto Arena, people. Is that the name? Crypto.com? That's where they're
Yeah,
going, huh? Staples Center is dead. Crypto is the
yeah. The
future of
Lakers,
not only
the
money, but
Lakers,
this, but the
they might be
stadium as
playing.
well.
Yeah, they might be playing in an arena named after money laundering. That's so I can't wait to watch how that plays out. Yeah, it's too bad. I mean, they Russ made a good point the other night when he said that Staples Center was a big part of his childhood, a big part of LA, a big part of, that entire state's really this fan base's identity was Staples Center. But at the end of the day, the memories that were made in there are more important than some office space retailer that sponsored the
So that's what
arena.
people found weird about it, right? It's not like Staples was collapsing or they were building a new arena in Inglewood or,
Yeah.
it's just the name. And in the
Yeah.
name, I know it's been there since day one. It's not like TD Garden that's had TD Bank North and Fleet Center and shit and all these things going on with it. But, you also had the LA Forum out there. You also had,
Mhm.
like, there's other things that have gone on. And just like the reaction to Staples was kind of weird to people, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of I think people are just generally annoyed with this Lakers team anyway. So it was just like one more thing that it was just like, come on, stop kicking us square in the nuts. And then the other thing is like crypto arena. Go it's just so 2021. It's crypto.com arena. The fact that a .com is going to be in the name of the place that the Lakers are going to be playing is kind of takes some getting used to. But yeah, like you said, it used to be the Boston Garden. It used to be the Great Western Forum. Great Western was a bank, which was the sponsor of the previous forum. The Fabulous Forum was where the Lakers used to play, and they would go over there to Boston in those final series, and they would play in the Boston Garden. And then eventually it became, like you said, different sponsors and stuff. But the one nice thing, to your point, kind of is that Garden always kind of remained there. It's
Yeah.
the TD Bank North Garden still. It'd be nice if Forum could have stuck around over the years wherever the Lakers played, but that isn't the case, and I guess I'm not that attached to Staples as some fans were. I know Vanessa Bryant took issue with it, saying that it was the arena, the house that Kobe built or whatever, but the house is still there. They didn't burn down the house.
Yeah. The Knicks fans get mad about the Garden thing, so we got to deal with that when it comes to that name.
Well, more
Oh,
history has taken place in the Boston Garden than in
there
Madison
we
Square
go.
Garden.
Celt-
That's all that matters.
Lakers back in the Celtics there. Crypto is definitely what annoys people because you got to hear about it every day to begin with. You got people convincing you to get on it. I don't know if you're one of these people trading it and, pumping it up in the Reddit forums, but like now it's just another chance nationally where you're just going to have it, just thrown at you constantly. The idea of, getting after that crypto money that
Yeah,
rise to the moon. And
yeah,
it's
exactly.
coming right out of LA now.
Yeah, I mean it. I have some friends who are way deep into crypto, and they've been trying to get me into. I have some money in Bitcoin or whatever, but it's not. I'm not heavily invested. But it is one of the more annoying conversations that have taken place over the last couple of years, and now that it kind of represents the Lakers in some way, or that the Lakers kind of represent it in some kind of way, I'm never going to shut up those friends.
Yeah,
That's just it's never going anywhere.
as long as the Lakers fans aren't pushing it, we'll keep
Yeah.
it two separate worlds. I want to start when we're talking about these two teams this year on Dennis Schroeder, which I think is a perfect way to go here. Revenge game tonight, possibly.
Hmm.
um, he was good last year for the Lakers throughout much of this year. I think he's been good throughout large segments of his career. Just hasn't really hammered down one spot that's worked for him. He had a good start in Atlanta, bounced out there, Oklahoma City, a couple of years, 6-man candidate, good scorer. Other parts of his game sort of come and go, but it just kind of brings me back to the Lakers having this championship core 2 seasons ago.
Hmm.
Schroeder obviously wasn't part of it, but I thought fit in decently well with it. And by the playoffs, I know he had the 0-point game, wasn't fitting in all that well. He had the vaccine stuff, and then there was some friction with LeBron just in terms of their styles. And by the end of the run there, just basically was assumed that it was going to be over. But he ultimately lands in Boston for $5 million. Who knows if the 84 million thing happened? He says no. All the reporting out there pretty much put it in the history books. And here we are.
Hmm.
Schroeder's playing great in Boston by my estimation for $5 million especially. Who knows if he does that deal with the Lakers, but the Lakers went another way with this Westbrook experience. And tonight's kind of the culmination of it. Is he going to have a big game and kind of stick it to them? Or Lakers fans ultimately going to be feeling better with Rush and what they did down there down the line. I'm surprised the Lakers didn't kind of stick with the core that they had, especially considering that it won
Me
a
too.
championship the season before. And, Schroeder fits in, Schroeder doesn't, but that was just kind of the sticking point for me, letting him go, of saying, all right, we're going to completely transform this core here because they need a new point guard.
Yeah, so the identity that the Lakers had 2 seasons ago when they won a championship was LeBron, Anthony Davis, and a whole bunch of smart defenders who can also knock down jump shots, right?
Mm-hmm.
Knock down 3-pointers, space the floor as well as they could. And that seemed to me like a perfectly fine equation to move forward with. But for whatever reason, and honestly, kind of starting with the Schroeder acquisition, that was the end of that identity, right? They send Danny Green, who is kind of one of the quintessential 3-and-D wings that the league has ever really seen. They send him out. They bring in Dennis Schroeder for a little bit more, uh, you know, burst when LeBron is out, a little bit more creativity on the ball. At the time, I was all right with the trade, but I think one thing that I didn't quite factor in, and one thing that I'll just cop to being wrong about, was that like it was the beginning of the end of that identity, and that
Mm-hmm.
identity was really important to winning a championship. And you look at the Mavericks team that won a championship, or the Marlins team that won its championship, and then immediately that those teams got just ripped apart. It was that they win a championship and then it was over. And I think it's kind of a disservice to the fan base. You want to see that team, you want to see that core try to repeat. You want to see what it looks like if they have an opportunity to repeat. And unfortunately, that team 2 years ago both because of, I think, the acquisitions and the roster moves that they made after the championship, and then also because of circumstances, right? Because they win that championship in the bubble, and then the season resumes, or we get the very next season a month later. Like that team never really had a shot.
Yeah.
You think, yeah, LeBron, AD should be able to figure it out, but the body can only go so far as the body can go. And so the combination of those two things, I think, really kind of took away from the opportunity to defend a championship. And then the Lakers doubled down on that approach after it didn't necessarily work out so well with Schröder. They were like, well, we just need a more stubborn guard. We need a guard who costs even more money and will take even and will cost you even more of that identity. And what we've seen so far this year is that, frankly, a lot of the Lakers fan base misses the identity that won them a championship 2 seasons ago.
Yeah, and those guys fit well next to LeBron. They did.
Yeah,
KCP, Kuzma. I know he kind of had a mixed view among fans and nationally, certainly. He kind of became a nice, like, 10-10 kind of guy through that run, and
yeah,
then, through the last season, tough on the boards, can hit a shot here or there, not the best shooter in the world, but, a tough, sturdy wing on the perimeter, and he's been awesome in Washington. The Lakers core has essentially boosted Washington to the top of the Eastern Conference, which is
yeah.
telling in and of itself. I
And
don't know if it's going to
Chicago.
last. Yes. Alex Caruso is the motor of the Chicago Bulls right now, right up there with steals with Marcus Smart leading the league. It's just incredible what those two teams have been able to do off those acquisitions from LA. And you look at where the Lakers are right now, they're thin. They're overly reliant on guys that just aren't the best shooters.
Mhm.
They're a frustrating watch. I mean, you look at the
Yeah.
baffling highlights out of Westbrook night in and night out, and you got these defenders of him, which, like, I'm not a Westbrook hater. I think he deserved to be in the 75th anniversary list. He's put up unfathomable stats that even if you're accusing him of stat hunting, I don't think anybody else could put up the numbers that he has, which is great. But at the same time, you have that defensive play at the end of the Thunder game where he just runs away from, I think it was Shy, as he
Yeah.
scores under the basket there.
Yep.
The shot the other night, I think it was against Utah or whoever it was, where he's just losing his dribble and then just throws it up. He's just out of control all the time. The
Mhm.
turnovers, the shot speaks for itself. And I never, ever pictured how it was going to work, him next to LeBron. You can make the argument that maybe they fill in and out for each other throughout the year, ease the burden on each other and Davis and all this stuff. But where is that going to lead? Because it's always about the playoffs, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, the Lakers tried to find a solution to a regular season problem where, what are we going to do when LeBron isn't playing? How can we clean up the minutes where LeBron is on the bench or if he isn't available? But if you're planning for LeBron being unavailable in any kind of a circumstance, like, LeBron James teams are not supposed to be good. Hell, any superstar's team is not supposed to be good when when the superstar isn't on the court. And so, like, trying to fix a solution to a problem where, if LeBron isn't available, the team's just not going to be good. Like, you just got to take your L. If LeBron is hurt or is tired or whatever, like, that's LeBron. LeBron is your identity, and so you got to do whatever you can to optimize LeBron James. It'd be like, saddling Steph Curry with uh Russell Westbrook. It's just like another guy who just demands to have, has to have the ball. Is unpredictable, where, both in terms of his production and what he's going to be doing on a basketball court at any moment on either side of the court. Like, everybody kind of laughs at, the moment that you're talking about where he's in the post, he loses his dribble, he hammers the dribble a little bit to try to get the ball up off the ground. It doesn't
No
get off
one
the
else
ground.
does this stuff.
Yeah. And then he turns around and he shoots a fadeaway bank shot that, had no chance from the get-go. Like, that's laughable in and of itself. But in my opinion, what hurts more than that is on defense, where the other team is in, like, semi-transition. And instead of taking a take foul, he goes for a steal at half court and takes himself out of the play defensively. And he does it multiple times per game. So that play that you're talking about is laughable in and of itself. and it's really easy to clip it and say like, what the hell is going on? Did he glitch out? But it only happens like the one time. Whereas the defensive stuff and the turnovers, where he's averaging, I think he's leading the league in turnovers right now, and he's one of the worst defensive team defenders out there. It's just it, it has to get better than this. Otherwise, the people who were responsible for that trade have some explaining to do.
For sure, especially since that was the shot, right? Like, this is really the last move of this LeBron Davis era, because what's left to ultimately move on from? We've seen LeBron escape from some cores throughout his career, and it's going to be very interesting to see if that's where they ultimately end up going by the trade deadline, is maybe dumping Westbrook off for some other guys, which would
Yeah.
just be a hilarious turn, and end to this whole thing here. But right now, they have to roll with this, and I like Westbrook. The passing sensational. I do think there's guys here that he can complement well in terms of shooters and stuff, but this compounds against some of the other issues with this roster. The age, right from day one, you knew that this was going to be kind of a brittle team that has a tough time getting through 82 games. And, preseason, Ariza's out. THT is out, who's actually one of the young guys. All of a sudden you're bringing in Avery Bradley, who's out of the league, and he's in the starting lineup here. DeAndre Jordan, which was like, they're really going to put him in the starting unit after the Nets never even played him. And just you keep going down the line here. Melo's actually been amazing. He's been one of the silver linings of this group, and it's still amazing to think that he was out of the league a couple of years ago. So I look up and down this roster. There's some good additions like Malik Monk. Kendrick Nunn, it's easy to forget, is on this team. I mean,
Well, he hasn't played.
Yeah.
That's why it's easy to forget. He hasn't been available. We haven't seen him. I think we've seen him in 1 or 2 preseason games, and then he twisted an ankle in practice. Actually,
he's
this
had a
is
weird
something.
career.
Well, this is something that I think kind of should get more attention than it's getting. He's the 4th highest paid Laker right now, unless you're counting Luol Deng.
Mhm.
But he's the 4th highest paid Laker right now, and he hasn't played a regular season game, and they haven't given any clarity. They've said it's a bone bruise on his knee, and that's why he hasn't been available. They haven't given any other clarity beyond that.
He kind of
And
disappeared in the playoffs with the Heat too, down the stretch there.
yeah, I mean, this is just who Kendrick Nunn is. He either looks like the best basketball player on the court because he's knocking down shots and he's taking guys off the dribble and doing whatever he can to not be bad defensively. Or, like you're saying, he kind of disappears. In this case, Lakers fans would like to get anything from him. And part of the thing here that makes that paints the signing in kind of a negative light is that I think Rob Pelinka saw and LeBron saw, by the way, Kendrick Nunn, a clutch client, as a replacement, a cheaper replacement for Alex Caruso, which is laughable. Like, those guys are just
Why
two
isn't
completely
Caruso
different
on this team?
taxes,
Money.
luxury taxes and stuff. And this is something that I've harped on them all season about. Like, hey, you can't cheap out when your team is in the middle of a championship window. You can't do that. And they did. And it's really kind of bit them both in terms of like missing Alex Caruso, the player, but also Alex Caruso, the asset. Like, they only have Taylor Horton Tucker in that kind of $10 to $13 million range as a contract that you could send out if you want to upgrade somewhere. And they don't want to send out Taylor Horton Tucker. And so if you bring back Alex Caruso, he's clearly a desirable NBA player. He was clearly a desirable NBA player when he was signed. At least sign and trade him so you can get some contracts back. So if you get to a spot like the Lakers are in, where they're missing Trevor Ariza, where they're missing Kendrick Nunn, where Wayne Ellington missed some time at the beginning of the year, where you
Another
realize,
guy,
holy crap,
yeah.
yeah, where you miss
Rondo.
where you realize, oh crap, Rondo might be washed. Oh crap, DeAndre Jordan has been washed. And where if you realize like you have to make some adjustments to your roster, you would have more flexibility to be able to do so. And they just don't. Like, it's either LeBron, Russ, or AD who are making 40 plus million bucks a year, THT who's making about 12 or 13, and then Kendrick Nunn who's making like 5. And after that, everybody else is a vet min kind of contract, and it makes it really difficult to adjust the roster, as the Lakers clearly have to.
Yeah, and that's where they are. I know they were prohibitive West favorites going into the year. Denver looks awesome if they're going to get any semblance of health this year. The Clippers are hanging in there. You think of some of these other teams out there. Portland's always solid. The Suns have been amazing after a slow start. There's some teams out there that they're going to have to contend with, and they actually look a step behind as they try to figure some things out here. And I don't know if they're going to be able to, given the health, given the balance between the different stars in this roster. Obviously, there's a chance, but do you think the Lakers are going to end up figuring this out and get back to the place where people expected them to be?
I've certainly lowered my expectations for them. I headed into the season with the Lakers being the favorite to come out of the West. I think that was kind of homerish of me in hindsight. I overlooked some things. Ironically, when they made all these acquisitions and when they had their offseason, I didn't really like their offseason. And I just kind of convinced myself, because that's what you do with the team that you've been rooting for 30 years. But I should have stuck to my initial instincts. I just don't think it was a very well thought out roster. They have zero, Bobby, zero natural small forwards outside of LeBron James. Like, it's the most important position in the sport, and they don't have a single natural small forward.
Go in Washington, and look at where the effect it's had in Washington.
Yeah,
they look so good with all these wings,
right? And so, I think, I think if we're trying to talk about like what it would look like if the Lakers, quote unquote, figure it out, I think it's contending. It's pushing Golden State in a Western Conference Finals. I think they could, if AD goes full Orlando bubble AD and LeBron is LeBron, you have to give them a puncher's chance against any team. It's just a matter of like, are the pieces around LeBron and AD capable of optimizing those guys so they can go full nuclear and beat Utah, Phoenix, they've won 10 straight.
Phoenix
Denver
would kill this team in a series.
Yeah. Denver. Well, it's funny. I had Gerard Bourget, who covers them for the Suns for PHNX, and when he was on, I asked him, "Hey, which team do you think Phoenix would have been more concerned about? A team more like the team that they beat last year in the playoffs, or this kind of team as the Lakers are currently built?" And he said, "Oh, easily the team that they would rather face the team as they're currently constituted, because you never really worry about Russell Westbrook in a playoff series. Whereas the team that the Lakers had last year before AD got hurt, they had kind of sort of figured out Phoenix. So it was a super odd offseason for a variety of reasons. But if the Lakers are sitting there telling me, hey, don't trust your eyes, that team wasn't close. We had to completely have a complete rebuild here on the fly. I just don't buy it.
How does this team look right now? If they do, what was the deal? Kuzma for everybody healed, essentially. I know there's probably some other stuff involved in there, but
it was Kuz and Trez for healed, and the Lakers would have been able to keep KCP, who I think is underrated as
and think of Buddy next to LeBron. I mean, this guy's one of the best shooters in the league, period.
Ever. Like, not currently in the league. He has more threes to this point in his career than Steph did to that point in his career. He right now, I think, is shooting 40+% on threes on 10 attempts per game. A lot of them very difficult type of shots on the move, type of 3-pointers that the Lakers would really benefit from. So like, ideally the Lakers offseason goes, you re-sign THT, you bring back Caruso.
You could have had the same team plus Caruso, but you could have brought in all the guys.
Yeah, you swap out Kuz, which Kuz they would have missed. I think that I still think you kind of miss Kuz if you send him over to Sacramento. You have to replace that athleticism and size on the wing, but you swap him out for Healed. You bring back Caruso, you bring back KCP. Obviously, he was under contract. Now you have Healed. You go out and sign Rudy Gay instead of Kendrick Nunn. From what I've heard, the Lakers kind of lowballed Gay, who wanted to be a Laker, but when he didn't get the full mid-level exception from the Lakers as an offer, he went to Utah. So you bring in Gay. Obviously, Ariza you could still go out and get. You could still get Malik Monk. You have AD, LeBron, bring back Dwight, get somebody who isn't a waterlogged corpse instead of DeAndre Jordan, and you carry forward that way. And I think That would have been the ideal kind of offseason. The Lakers went in the opposite direction of that.
Hey, we'll turn to the Celtics. And before,
Yeah.
if any Lakers fans are listening, if anyone is just enraged by our conversation here and all the things the Lakers have done wrong, go get yourself Calm, the Calm app. This is
I
the
need it.
perfect way to settle down as you just lose your mind over the run of bad moves. Philly fans, this is great for you. But it's fitting for the Lakers because LeBron is on the Calm app. You can have LeBron read you a bedtime story, just meditation, rain. I love the rain going to bed. Premium subscription, 40% off as a Garden Report listener, as well as here on Dome Theory. We love to shout out our friends at CLNS Media. And one of our best friends right now is Calm. Calm.com/garden. You'll get a 40% discount on a Calm premium subscription. All kinds of good stuff over there. Just scratching the surface of the different things you're going to be able to do to relax, sleep, meditate, all those different things. Some yoga. I love all that stuff when I'm not screaming and yelling about basketball. And, we could all use that break. And now back to the frustration, and we'll turn it toward Boston because, man, are the Celtics fans frustrated with their new head coach, with the systems they're running. Certainly the shooting on this roster is terrible. 27, 26, I think, after all the games finished the other night in three-point shooting. You talk about roster construction. They didn't have a lot of flexibility, but what they ended up with were a lot of guards who can't shoot, a lot of big men, and the Jays having to do all the playmaking essentially here. So we'll see, ahead of tonight's game. I don't know if Jalen's going to play. I don't know if Rob's going to play yet as we speak here. Obviously, two critical guys, the two net rating leaders on this roster. But I've loved through the injuries the ability to see Schröder as a starter. Him and Smart, weird combo, but a +8 net rating through their minutes so far as a two-man duo. Neither of them can shoot at all, but Smart's passing and Schroeder's slashing, I think he's 66% at the rim, have just been, openers for this offense when they're both out there. 38 points against Milwaukee for Schröder. Again, I didn't really get your full thoughts on what you thought of Schröder as a player as he went through LA. There's quite a mixed reaction to him here in Boston. High turnovers, certainly part of the experience. The shot just looks horrible. Everything that comes off his fingertips looks like it's going to miss. And, the defense has been better than expected, I'd say. So overall, I think you got to be happy with what he's bringing to Boston, even though it's probably just a one-year commitment. Some people still frustrated with the erraticness at times of his play. So what do you make of his fit here in Boston?
I think any team that landed Schröder after last season and then the offseason was going to get a player who kind of was taught by the league and taught by the market. Okay, yeah, I'm not as good as I thought I was. I had Kyle Goon on a podcast basically right after the season ended last year. And one of the things he said was that there are some people in the Lakers organization who were hoping that some guys learned that they weren't as good as they thought they were. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out the illusion there is to Dennis Schroeder and to Andre Drummond and to Montrezl Harrell, three guys who came to a Lakers team with a championship core and basically told a championship team, this is how it's going to go down. This is the role I'm expecting. And you guys gotta fit to me. And it's laughable. It's laughable to walk into a situation that was as successful as the Lakers were and demand anything. You should be happy to be in a championship culture, and they did not. And so I think, when you're talking about Dennis Schroeder and where he's at right now, I think, that experience hopefully was good for him so that he kind of grows from it and realizes, hey, the best year I've had as an NBA player to this point in my career, I came off the bench.
Mm-hmm.
I ran a second unit. I could do all the things. I could be erratic. I could be unpredictable in that kind of a spot because at the end of the day, I'm not the starting point guard. I might not even be the closing point guard some nights, though most nights in OKC he was. And so I think with Boston, him saying that he's willing to come off of the bench in Boston, he's, like you said, on a $5 million deal, which is quite the step back from the 4-year, I think it was $72 million deal that the Lakers offered him. And, he's realizing, like, all right, what I did last year, I have to do the opposite of that now moving forward for the rest of my career if I want to have the career that I think I'm capable of. So I liked his fit in Boston. You mentioned his defense. I think he competes. Like that was one of the things I really walked away impressed with Schröder was the dude really plays his butt off on that side of the ball. He's small, so it's kind of the Avery Bradley thing where he really tries and he really seems to care on that side of the court. But at the end of the day, there's just not much you can do when you're 6 foot or whatever. So that's always going to be an issue for him. But he has good length. He has pretty good defensive instincts. And then the offense is always going to be unpredictable, like you're talking about, because of the shot. He's the kind of guy who can knock down open jumpers, but he's never going to be the kind of guy who bends defenses because they have to respect him as a shooter. So, him as a cutter, him playing off of smart players. Horford, I think, is a really good match for him. I know Horford, I guess, made a call to Schröder in free agency to bring him over there because
Yeah, never knew the love fest between those two. Never saw that in Atlanta.
Yeah, they were, and it kind of makes sense, right? Horford can step out, space the floor. He's a good passing big. Schröder is really good as a cutter. So you kind of invert the relationship there between big and point guard, and it kind of works. It makes sense. And so with him, and then Smart being somebody who can kind of muscle up for the spots that Schröder doesn't have the physicality for because of his frame. That pairing works defensively. Offensively, it's going to limit you a little bit. But when you have Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, who, when they're playing at their best, can make up for any kind of the offensive issues that are presented there, I think it's a pretty good core. It's a good 6-man rotation there with those 5 guys and Robert Williams. And then from there, you kind of build the roster out.
Yeah, and this defense has real potential. I feel stupid last year thinking that Tristan Thompson, Daniel Tice core thing they had going there was going to be a top-tier defense. It was a disaster, and there's, I think, a lot of reasons that went into that. Too much offense from Smart, taken away from his defense. The Jays certainly took a step back in that regard. What you talk about with Schroeder's playmaking and Horford's, I think has been such a relief on the Jays and Smart this year. I think they've all been better on defense just because the load those guys take off them offensively to make plays. Schröder especially. I love that they've made him the de facto point guard. Now, that calls into question the Smart extension and really just Smart standing here because you gave him a raise and years ahead of this off kind of the thought that he would be the point guard of this team into the future, and he really hasn't become that. He's kind of just doing what he always has in terms of his role, which is fine. He's back to being the defender that he was. He leads the league in steals. I think he's been all over the floor, things we didn't see from him last year. But this team just has dominant potential on defense. The things Horford is doing at that end are incredible. Rob, really just one of the best, most versatile defenders at that big spot in the league right now when he's out there. Now, another injury is what the concern is with him. But overall, I like the look on that end. It's just the offense. I don't know where it's going to come from consistently. Tatum's numbers are horrible to start this year. I think spacing's a big part of that. Brown, lots of bumps and bruises, knee, hip, wrist ultimately knocked him out last year. He's a physical player who gets into those spots and I think just kind of bangs himself up throughout the course of a season. So you wonder if he's going to start to become an injury-prone guy just with the way he plays here. So I like the core like you. They're a little thin. Your next starter after the starters lose a guy is Schröder. Next guy after that's Grant Williams, who...
Yeah, that's not great.
Yeah. I mean, he's hitting threes, but he doesn't bring you much else to the table. They have a lot of bigs, and most of them can't play, including Cantor. The guard rotation, given Pritchard just disappearing, isn't great. And really the young cast on this team, who looked good in Summer League, has disappeared. So that's concerning here. I guess what's just kind of your overall reflection on where they're at, like going forward with the Jays and everything that they're doing here? Because it's just kind of a bridgy roster. I guess you can throw Richardson into that too. Like he's just kind of a guy that's here and doing stuff, but there's no real future for Josh Richardson in Boston.
Yeah, I think Boston has 6 guys that you can trust, with the guys that we talked about, right? Schröder, Smart, the Jays, Horford, and Williams. There's your 6 guys that are going to, at any point, 2 or 3 of those guys have to be on the court at all times. And then from there, you have some guys that some nights are going to have it and some nights aren't. and you got to hope that of the remaining, those 7 through 10 guys in your rotation, that enough of those guys have it to be able to bolster what's going on with your top 6. And I think if I was kind of in charge of putting this team together, I would do whatever I can, whatever I could flip to go out and get like 2 more guys, so that number 6 goes to like 8 guys that you can trust closer to night in, night out.
Kind of what
That
Philly did, right? Like Danny
Yeah.
Green, Seth Curry, they went
Yeah.
out and got those guys, and it's been a massive difference.
Yeah, those look, at the end of the day, it's a superstar league. So whoever is your, top 1, 2, maybe 3 guys, that's gonna that defines your ceiling. But your floor oftentimes is defined by, all right, what role players, how often can I trust this role player here? And with the Lakers, for example, Melo has been way better than advertised, but Monk on a night by night basis, don't necessarily trust him. Ellington on a night by night basis, don't necessarily trust him on the defensive side. Well, and I don't ever trust him on the defensive side. And so the Lakers, they're kind of left with having to choose which guy, do we need offense or defense here? And I think for both Boston and the Lakers, they need more role players that they can trust more often on both sides of the ball.
And that's been years in the making, like just in terms of a development for this group. 2020, they were a championship contender, and the first guys off the bench were Brad Wanamaker and Grant Williams. They had a cast of youth constituting that bench too, when they had a real chance to win it all. And Ainge, and we're so early into the Stevens tenure to even get an idea of what he values and what things are important to him, but you knew Ainge was all about the superstars and let everything else just fall into place. That was sort of his mindset there, that he had the stars, and they did, and Hayward, Kemba, Tatum, and Brown that year. You'd be all right, and everything else would just kind of hold up. And it really didn't that year. And that just run on talent that they've had here, where guys walking out the door, has sort of exposed that further, just that depth issue that they have, that you don't have reliable role players here, and they really haven't made a big attempt to go out there and get them. Like I've never been a Richardson guy. This is 4th team in 4 years, and there's a reason for that, just in terms of his offensive game. And he's a good defender, but doesn't give you much consistently on the offensive side of the ball. And you'd like to see them address that. They almost did with Evan Fournier. And, he came out here. I was much happier with him than most Celtics fans. 55% on his open threes, good catch and shoot guy, perfect complement to the Jays. And I guess some people got frustrated with him because he couldn't guard James Harden round 1. Like
back when you weren't allowed to guard James Harden.
He got $80 million, which I get, but at the same time, like him in New York, which isn't looking good, versus him in Boston, where I thought he actually looked pretty good at different things. And there were tax things that went into that, as you talk about with the decisions the Lakers made. You want to be able to make a sign and trade possibly down the line, and you get hard capped by that. I get all those things. But at the same time, this team, again, I see them too fixated. Are they looking at Bradley Beal? Are they looking at Zach LaVine next offseason? I don't know. But like those are the kind of things, the moves that they've made speak to me as them emphasizing rather than putting a team together right now to be competitive. And here they are again. They're a 500 team probably this year.
Yeah, I think so. I'm looking at some of the numbers here with Boston, and so you talked about like the kind of defense that they can play and that they're capable of playing, and some of the offensive issues that they might have because of the lack of shooting that they have with their point guard shooting guard combo. Get out and run. Like if you're capable of getting spots, and right now they're the 23rd fastest team in the league, 23rd or 30, and
that's a Tatum issue.
Yeah, you got to
get.
You've
watched Tatum, boom,
Yeah.
boom, boom. It's almost an 8-second violation every time he's walking up the floor.
Right. I think, if I was a Celtics fan, which I shudder at the thought, but like if I was a if I was a Celtics fan, I would be sitting there on the sideline screaming, "Run, run, run, get out!" And because especially for a team that is still figuring some things out offensively and is still getting its legs underneath them, it simplifies the game. Like I think Tatum makes a game really difficult on himself with the number of dribbles he takes per possession. So it's just get out and run, get some easy buckets.
especially for him, how frustrated he is right now. He's a guy that just lets the officiating get in his head. He doesn't get many easy baskets, and you don't have great creators here. You don't have shooters to take the pressure off of him. But you're right. If you get out and run, that's the easiest shot you can make. And for some reason, that's just not part of who he is as a player. He'll get out on the
Yeah.
break probably like once a week, and it's like, wow, that was awesome. But most of the time, he's just dribbling it up slowly. And that's the real dichotomy between him and Brown. I'm not one of these guys that says they can't play together and you're eventually going to have to break them up, which some Celtics fans feel like. But there is a real pacing difference between the way these guys play. Brown's one of the best transition players in basketball. Tatum wants to do his thing in the half court and dribble and fade away and all that stuff. And he's phenomenal skill-wise. But there's a real difficulty to his game, as you describe. And you see it in his percentages right now and really his career percentages. He's a mid-40s shooter for his career, maybe low 40s with how he started this year.
Yeah, I think if he doesn't want to run, then fine, make him the trailer. And after, because I know Schröder wants to run. Like that was one of the things that he really liked doing here with the Lakers. Horford is old, but he's good at
That's his
outletting.
role. Yeah, grab the rebound, run
Yeah.
across half court, and get it over there. Yeah.
One thing, Horford is one of the better outlet passers, that the league has seen over the course of his career. So that's something that he can get out and do. Smart.
I love Horford.
Yeah,
I am so
Horford.
happy he's back.
Yeah, not Hart. Smart is somebody who is, just I think he sprints to make coffee in the morning. Like he's that kind of a guy. And I think and like you said, Jaylen Brown is a freaking gazelle out there. So if you have enough guys with that, Robert Williams is a great rim runner. So you have enough guys there to get out and run. And if Tatum doesn't want to be a part of that, cool, make him the trailer. And after transition and semi-transition doesn't work out, he can get the ball at the top of the key and isolate against a defense that is now scrambling because it had to match up in transition. It just, I always kind of worry about teams at the bottom of pace when, like Philly being at the bottom of the pace, they're the 30th fastest team. They're the slowest team in the NBA. They have Joel Embiid. So it kind of makes sense that you want to pound the ball inside to Joel Embiid. But, and then same for Denver, right? Denver with Jokic, they're 29th in pace. But if you don't have a big like that and you're that slow, it makes me question, like, what is everybody doing there?
Yeah, there's a lot of baffling things about this team. The off-ball movement they get hasn't been great for a couple of years now. Makes me question sort of what's going on offensively with the scheme they're running. And, it's through two coaches now. The pace thing has been infuriating for a few years, especially since it started so well this year. There's something with this team, just consistency carrying game to game. Things don't last. They'll start to do something well, and it won't be there the next game. And yes, injuries are a part of that. A lot of guys have been in and out of this lineup. But opening night, you go back and watch Knicks Celtics, and I'm sure you did, with it being the national game that night. They had this beautiful thing going where Brown was leading the offense and Tatum was kind of running off him. And Brown's not the best playmaker, but he's a fantastic pacer. I mean, they're going to start flying up and down the floor playing off Brown. And this is my thing about Brown. I don't think he's ever going to be better than Tatum, but he's closer than people think. And he needs to be accentuated here like that's the case. Like, he cannot just be standing in the corner. He can't just be waiting for the ball to come his way. Like, he's got to be on the ball making things happen. I almost think of Ben Simmons at his height. He was a guy who could shut down Tatum. He was one of the better Tatum defenders in the league. And then, there was a game where Brown was on the ball a little bit more. In fact, Tatum might have been out in that game with the COVID protocol, and Brown was crossing him up, blowing by him, dunking. And I think people just forget how good Jaylen Brown is. And I sort of wanted to see this team take on his personality more than Tatum's. And I've always been a bigger Brown fan than Tatum. But sometimes he just gets kind of caught behind, and he's going through injuries now too, which is something with him. But it's frustrating. Just this team wants to do things like ball movement. Their assist rate is dipped. Pace. They were great pace to start the year, and it is dipped. And their defense has gotten better, which is encouraging. And now they're toward the top of the league in defense. But then that falls apart against Atlanta the other night. This group's just in a weird place, and they have been for a few years. I don't know where it's going to lead. I sort of think that they're going to have to make some changes closer to the deadline, and that might end up being selling if this thing keeps kind of dipping here. people shudder at the thought of that. And I don't mean the Jays, but like, you get a first round pick for Schröder. Maybe you think about that. Maybe you get a first round pick for Smart. Maybe you think about that. It'd be tough to deconstruct some of the talent on this roster, but if you're in contention, maybe you swap out some of those pieces for shooters. I mean, they're not in a great flexibility spot, but do you think there's moves that this team ultimately could make close to the deadline that could kind of save them roster-wise?
Well, the one thing that Boston, I think, will have as an advantage as guys get bought out is that they'll have legit roles for players who are looking to prove themselves, for either the next chapter in their career, maybe one of the last chapters in their career. So, like, I like I said earlier, I trust about 6 guys on this team. That means you have 4 rotation spots potentially available that they can at least compete for. I'm not saying that they're going to get players better than the guys at the end of their rotation definitively in the buyout market, but they can at least sit down in a meeting with the players that they'd have access to and say, hey, you want to be one of the first guys off the bench? Do you want to, sometimes close some games? We desperately need shooting over here. These kinds of things. That's one way I think they can really improve their roster. But yeah, it's kind of a fork in the road moment for them. Do they buy further into the Tatum and Brown identity as as this generation's Antoine Walker, Paul Pierce identity that the Celtics had back in the day? Or do they say, you know what? Maybe this isn't an ideal matchup. Maybe one of those guys wants a bigger role. Maybe Brown doesn't want to be second fiddle to Tatum. Maybe Tatum wants a more natural, bigger wing next to him or whatever. But that's kind of the decision that they have to make, if not this year, but certainly this next offseason. Is like, what's the identity moving forward? And I think Boston has one of the more fascinating seasons ahead of them, because that not many organizations have that identity crisis that they have to figure out the way that Boston does.
Yeah, and there's no clear path to it. I mean, maybe that star becomes available and they end up throwing together a package. Maybe a star wants to be here so badly with those guys that it doesn't cost them a ton, like Lonzo to Chicago. I know they had their eyes on Lonzo and it just didn't work. A guy like Lowry, I would have loved to hear as a third piece, but I think that is kind of where they're eyeing, is like, who can be that next Kemba with this group? Because Kemba obviously didn't work out. But at the same time, you want to see some competitiveness in the meantime. And man, this 500 slog they've been on has worn on them. It has. Like, when they win, it feels like a massive relief. And when they lose, it's like the world's falling. And part of that's Boston. Like, I think just the craziness of Boston and like every downturn being like, that's the end of an era here, just accentuates some of the frustration and like sky is falling feeling around this team. Because like, people are always going to look this way, but I don't think you can trade one of the Jays. You just can't. They're both too good. What you're getting back, like Simmons, that was a joke. There's no world where you can trade Brown for Simmons. Maybe you throw some other things in there. You start to think about it. Like, someone threw out a trade with John, my co-host on the show, where like Boston gets Philly's whole like depth core and Simmons for Brown. But we know that's not happening with how Philly's approaching the Simmons situation. So you can't do that. Like, does Towns become available? I don't want Towns over Brown. I don't even think I want Beal over Brown, which has been a big conversation here. So you don't have anything else to deal if you're Boston is the problem. Like, does anyone want Smart around the league? I'm sure for like a fair deal, but he's not like a centerpiece for a star. Rob's too hurt, I think, to have great value around the league. And their young guys are valueless, essentially. So I don't think there's great flexibility in Boston. I like the new coach. I like some of the things he's emphasizing. But for some reason, we've seen the players only meeting early this year and just some of the friction within and the weirdness of this group. I think there's something deeper going on here than just like a talent issue. And there is a talent issue, but at the same time, like, they're better than an under 500 team, which they've essentially been since the bubble.
Yeah, so I'm looking at their roster and some of their contracts and stuff, and they have contracts that, maybe not this year, but certainly next year when they're expirings, or this offseason when they become expiring contracts heading into next season, that you could combine with a draft pick and maybe go out and get somebody. But yeah, I think the biggest thing here, to me, it seems like it's a data accumulation season for me where, all right, we got to figure out what we have here with Robert Williams. What can we do to help this guy stay healthy? We got to figure out with Marcus Smart, is he a point guard? Is he a kind of Caruso Dellavedova type point guard where he just kind of is there by name of the position, or is he somebody who can actually handle the ball and do some creating? With Tatum and with Brown, uh, which of those guys is willing to go down there and play the four? Because I know sometimes with wings or with just you're talking to somebody who's watched Anthony Davis not be interested in playing his best position.
Oh, that is another
So-
frustrating thing.
So like you with guys nowadays, you have to be able to like, all right, Brown, if you don't want to be a power forward for most of your career, then we got to figure out where that puts you, because Tatum isn't a shooting guard. And Tatum, I know Tatum probably isn't interested in playing power forward. Can you basically employ a team of wings and switch everything, get out and run and all of those things? And can you get Tatum to buy into that type of identity and allow him to play a little faster? All of these things, like you got to start, if you aren't going to actually compete on the level of like win a championship this year, then you have to start answering some of these major questions facing the roster, the organization. Like, how is Brad Stevens going to handle, being an executive, shifting from coach to executive? Those are two completely different jobs. How is Ime Udoka going to work with Brad Stevens and with this era of NBA player? All of these things, for me, if I was either in the Celtics organization or rooting for that team, it would be like, all right, we have to find a purpose to the season.
You probably want to see some young guys play too, right? I
That
mean,
too,
like
yeah.
Pritchard, Neesmith, Langford, and Grant's played a little bit. They're buried right now. And,
Yeah.
that happened under Brad too, so maybe they're just not good. I won't rule that out. I'm certainly not a huge fan of any of them, but I think that's very frustrating for some fans right now, is the fact that none of those guys can get minutes given where they're at right now. It's not like things are going great with the rotation they've been using here. It's hard to get a read on this group. Like, the Jays don't talk a ton. Like, there's not a lot of like expression of like the true frustrations going on here, what guys want. Smart certainly called the team out earlier this year in very vivid terms, and I think his role here is necessary, but maybe grinds on guys a little bit, which who knows, that might be necessary. They've certainly played better since he did that. So and they did that whole turnover with this story that essentially Ainge retired and Brad was the plan to replace him the whole time, but there's really no clear answer on why Brad didn't want to coach anymore. And then
Yeah.
that was so weird to me, and you sort of just had to take it and be like, all right, I guess that was the plan. Like,
Yep.
all right, we'll see what the story ultimately ends up being there long term when things finally do settle into place. But that's an unsettling backdrop to this all too. Like, who is leading the Celtics organization in the future? Is Brad the GM for the next 20 years? Guess it's possible, but I have my doubts about a 45-year-old coveted coach staying a GM for the rest of his career. I don't know, but that's sort of where the Celtics stand. And it's pretty amazing that this sort of looked like the prohibitive title favorite for the next decade or so when they had that Kyrie, Hayward, Horford, and the young guys core just 3 years ago now at this point. So there we have it. Celtics Lakers tonight, 7:30 at the Garden.
Get excited. Two mediocre, depressing teams. Let's go.
I will be there. I'm still excited about it. I think it'll be a good game. I can get into the night in, night out thing still, even with some of the long-term worries about these groups. And I do think it'll be a good game. Who do you got? Give me your prediction, Anthony.
Well, with LeBron coming back, as of right now, he's considered questionable by the Lakers. If LeBron plays, I think I'd have to favor the Lakers in this matchup, especially if Brown can't go or if Robert Williams can't go. Then like that's a tough matchup for him. If those guys can go and LeBron can't go, then obviously that swings the other way. So a lot of it really kind of depends on who all is available. But Let's just say everybody is available. I think the Lakers eke out a win here. I
Forgot the
think
other
it's close.
underlying story of this one. Did you see Ennis Cantor's post about LeBron within the last few days?
I guess I didn't. I did. Did he take a shot at LeBron over China?
He did take a shot at LeBron for bowing down to China, and
Uh,
money
well,
over morals, I think was the quote or something to that effect. I think he also said something like, you'll shut up and dribble when China tells you to, or something to that effect. I mean, there was a real serious call out.
yeah. I mean, there's something to it. I think LeBron, that was one of the few public missteps that LeBron has taken with China. That
I wonder
said,
if he's going to get asked about that tonight. It's going to be very interesting.
it was certainly if Cantor called him out by name and stuff like that's somebody's going to ask LeBron about it. I just think, like, personally, given where Cantor stands on a basketball court and what LeBron is capable of doing near the rim on a basketball court, I probably wouldn't call him out right before I play him, but that's just me.
Well, Cantor, for one reason or another, and you know, NBA writers have one evaluation of it, Breitbart and some other media outlets have another evaluation of why Cantor isn't playing right now. He actually has started to play within the last couple of games, but Cantor's been a DMP for most of the season. That is a story that is just really fascinating right now, because I believe the Celtics are shut off in China over this. They've been very, very quiet about why, like, how they're handling this and like what's going on with it. Like, Udoka doesn't really fully answer all the questions about it. The line, I think, essentially has just been he has a right to express himself, but gonna be really interesting to watch because Cantor's rhetoric has been pumped up big time over it, and I think almost alluded to the fact that, like, he's kind of believing he hasn't been playing because of this protest that he has going on, which is a very interesting situation, especially when he's on $1 million contract. I don't know if they end up rolling with him through this or they end up cutting him or trading him for one reason or another. But that's when the story really blows up, if they end up going in that direction. At the same time, admirable and brave what he's doing. I mean, he took on the Turkish regime, and now he's
Yep.
taking on the Chinese regime. Two very powerful dictators who
Yeah.
who Cantor's not a hard guy to miss in the street. I think he's very brave, and I do think it's admirable and true, a lot of the stuff he's talking about Nike and shoes and how they're produced, the Uyghurs and things that are happening in them in China, and really just the NBA's dependency on China versus the human rights record there. I think it's all valid stuff, and he kind of has gotten a bad rap on it, just in terms of how everybody has treated his protest here compared to maybe some other players.
Yeah, I think a lot of what he said on China is super true. They've been brutal, especially like you're talking about with the Uyghurs. I think that's something that should always get more attention. And we do live in a country where you are allowed to speak your mind on any number of things, and if you have a platform like Cantor has earned for himself, you can use that platform however you prefer. That said, if you're a middling NBA player and you say things that uh, you know maybe the NBA doesn't agree with because of the partnership that they have with China,
I
then
think we know where this is
that's
going. I mean, this is
well
probably going to be Cantor's last year in the league.
maybe I just think if it was his last year in the league and he hadn't said this stuff, I wouldn't bat an eye.
Yeah, that's true.
He's had a nice long career for himself, and the league has kind of passed up players of his archetype, where he's a big slow guy who can't really switch out onto perimeter guys, very skilled offensively, very limited defensively, and that's not the kind of big who lasts in 2021 in the NBA. And so I think if this is his last year, and he thinks it's his last year because of the stance that he takes, and he continues to maintain that stance, yeah, that is brave. That is the fact that he is cognizant of a decision that he is making and a stance that he is taking, and something that he obviously clearly cares about. If he is doing that and thinks that doing so might cost him in a year or two at the end of his career, then that is brave. It's very commendable. I just don't know that I necessarily agree that it's going to cost him the last couple of years of his career, because he's at the end of his career.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess both things kind of coincide with one another. And I do love Cantor, covering him a couple of years here. Seen the camps they did over the summer, like a
Yeah,
camp a
he
day.
seems like a pretty good guy.
Yeah.
Very, very good guy.
And man, he is not afraid to go at LeBron either. I think he's
Yeah.
probably top of the list in terms of guys that have butted head with LeBron directly over the last 4 or 5 years here. Anthony, great talking to you. I'm sure we'll reconnect again for a Celtics Lakers game in the future. And check out Silver Screen and Roll, where he writes regularly on the Lakers and covers them. Anthony, appreciate it. Enjoy the game tonight, and we will talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you.